what does restorative practice look like if it's done incorrectly? Maybe that's the question I need to ask you.
The main challenge first is mindset.
Okay.
Um, and that's where we go back to implicit biases that educators or students are not aware of, right? It's the main challenge. The second would be when the facilitator, and I've seen this often, the facilitator themselves have an opinion because off of what a student may have said in the circle and now take control of the entire conversation.
Mm.
Or they allow, you know, the most direct, blunt student to take lead of the conversation and cannot bring it back so that every single person can speak. That would be another challenge, you know? And then the third, and I know you asked for probably like one, but I really have to say it, are students with disabilities.
Yeah.
You know, they oftentimes, or ENL students, they're left quiet, and a teacher may think, oh, they don't want to talk. Okay, just pass the talking stick. Just pass the talking stick. No, maybe that child cannot access language. Maybe they have a speech impediment. Like, I get it. Traditionally, a restorative circle involves using words and language, but there's other ways. Maybe you want to assign that child to a buddy, or maybe you want to allow that child to draw out and use that as a tool. Just letting students see that people communicate differently and to be tolerant and respectful to your community members, because when we become adults, we come across that. You know, I've come across adults that don't have the proper language for whatever reason, but I still try to understand them. I'm empathetic to their needs and respectful to them. And I think they're lost oftentimes in the circles.
Okay. So that's something to be mindful of for someone who's facilitating circles is
Mhm.
even though a child might pass the stick off, they don't speak or any of those things, there could be a reason or a story
Mhm.
behind that. How
Mhm.
would you suggest a teacher find that out? Learn more about that.
Individual conferencing.
Okay.
Doing something like a kids talk, and a kids talk is like you select a child like that, and you ask the child respectfully, who do you feel comfortable with the most in the school, and then you have that educator, para, it can be the secretary, payroll secretary, have that person then interview the student, and asking them questions that can help with them participating in circles or getting an understanding as to why they feel uncomfortable speaking. Oftentimes in the past, you will have students, and maybe because I'm coming from a school where school culture is very strong, you would have a student say more than one adult. So it would just be a conversation between two or three adults and the student, asking them questions like, why don't you feel comfortable in the circle? Like, what's going on? How can we, make it better for you? What can we do? And the students are honest. Once you say, I'm really interested in hearing your feedback, they'll tell you. So I would say the individual conferencing.
Individual conference. So it essentially the entire school staff needs to be trained in restorative practices. This can't be
Yes.
just your teachers and your admins. This
No.
needs to be fully staffed training that needs to be happening.
Yes. Because how someone talks to a child will play a factor on the trust later on in a circle, and I've seen it fall apart. It can also cause staff members to kind of have, my New York slang, beef with one another, right? They have problems with one another because they feel like, oh, well, this child respects you, but they don't respect me. And in reality, it's because you're talking at the child, you're not talking to the child.
Mm.
You're listening to react, instead of listening to understand. And that's something you learn through restorative practices. So to avoid that, everyone should just be trained.
Everybody should be trained. That should be mandatory. Um, Something like that in order for this to really work. And to me, that makes sense. And really, whenever you're doing any type of, multi-tiered system, all those things, PBIS, to me,
Mhm.
it should be your whole staff should be familiar with what's happened, social emotional learning, everything.
Mhm.
Any of those type of strategies, frameworks, there it should be a staff wide situation.
Mhm.
Um, Now with circles, I've talked to teachers
Mhm.
about circles, for example, and they would say, yeah, when we would circle up, the students would basically default to, oh, somebody must have messed up. Someone must have done something bad.
I'm happy you said that.
So, okay, I want you to touch on that. What would be your response if you had a teacher that said something to you like that?
You need to change your circle. So there's many types of circles.
Mhm.
People only want to circle up when a child does something bad. But you have community building circles that you can do in advisory just so that the children can get to know one another and you can get to know the kids. You have school-wide expectation circles. So if there's a new initiative going on in the school, you can do a circle for that. You have celebrations. I mean, remember, indigenous populations will do circles for celebration. So if a
Mhm.
child had, growth in an ELA score, growth in a math score, like you can do a circle and you can honor them for that. You can honor their culture at home or, within their home, within their, like I would say, nationalities. You can honor that in a circle. It doesn't always have to be negative.
Mhm.
Sometimes, and I've done this where it wasn't discipline, but it was more of healing. I came across a group of students who identified within the LGBTQ plus IA community, and they had a hard time navigating that as middle schoolers. And they had, common struggles of their parents understanding how they identify as and who they like. That was a healing circle. And I would take those young ladies and I would do a circle bi-weekly for that particular subgroup in the school community just so that they can vent and they can get some understanding of why they're similar, but as well as get an understanding of why their parents are the way they are and how can they navigate their relationships with their family as well as within the schools and each other. So it doesn't always have to be negative and a
Mhm.
child has to act out. If you keep it negative, the children do not want to do the circle. Point blank, period. It's the same thing I tell parents with parent engagement. If you only call home for the negative, do you really think that child's going to build a relationship with you? No. Why do you have to just highlight the negative? Highlight the positive as well.
So that also, so the circling can also be a way to, again, be proactive as opposed to reactionary. So
Mhm,
if you're only doing it because somebody messed up, someone did
mhm.
something, there's some harm done, if that's the only reason why you're doing those circles, then it defeats the purpose, and then ultimately the kids aren't going to want to look forward to doing circles. Now
Yeah.
you mentioned you could do these during advisory times. Would you recommend class time being spent on circles?
Um, I would say if you're going to, and I've seen it done, especially within the ELA curriculum, where students were looking at zero tolerance versus restorative practices in school systems. But the ELA standard they were really addressing was central idea and using textual evidence. I've seen it done within units of study using readings and students doing arguments within a restorative circle. So it doesn't only have to be done within advisory. I would do it in clubs. I would do it during lunchtime to build a sense of community for students. So I wouldn't just put it in advisory. I do think for advisory programs, you get the most bang for your buck, though,
Why is that?
because most students do better when they have that one adult or at least two adults that they can always go to
Mhm.
navigate the struggles of being a high schooler or of being a middle schooler. And I do think if every adult is paired up in the school with a group of kids, it builds a sense of ownership where it's not just your kid, your class, it's our kids, our class, our school. Um, so yeah,
Got
advisor would get most bang for your buck.